Welcome to Charette Theory. Today, we open the doors to a world where past and present intertwine, a living room that does more than merely exist. It glows. It invites. It breathes. Here, the polished geometry of Art Deco doesn't overpower the space, it partners with spring's ephemeral light to create something timeless, yet alive. Something glamorous, yet fresh. This is where elegance meets optimism. Art Deco, born in the Jazz Age, has always been a celebration of modern luxury, a visual symphony of bold silhouettes, intricate ornament, and sumptuous materials. From the glint of chrome to the discipline of symmetry, it conjures the glamour of an era that danced in defiance of restraint. Yet today, we soften that choreography. We allow in the breeze. We welcome the quiet. Because spring changes everything. Filters through sheer curtains, pools on parquet floors, and lends new meaning to even the most sculpted silhouette. It reveals not only what a space is, but what it can become. In spring, Art Deco doesn't lose its edge, it learns to exhale. The darkness of winter retreats, and in its place comes a celebration of luminosity, air, and the promise of renewal. This isn't a story of opposites in tension. It's one of balance. Of architectural clarity wrapped in the softness of seasonal light. Of cool marble warmed by morning sun. Of materials once considered untouchable now made inviting by the passage of time and the intimacy of design. In this episode, we'll explore how to craft a living room where the sophistication of the 1920s meets the vitality of spring. You'll discover how to use symmetry not just for order, but for serenity. You'll learn how to choose materials that not only reflect light but also carry it through the room. And you'll see how the ornate becomes approachable when framed through the lens of nature's gentle reawakening. So settle in, and let the season guide your imagination. This is the Glamour of Light, a story told in shadow and shine, in pastel and polish, in tradition and transformation. Welcome to your spring-ready Art Deco living room. To understand springtime Art Deco, we first step back, nearly a century, into the age that birthed it. It was the 1920s. The world, newly emerged from the shadows of war, was dancing toward the future. Cities were rising skyward, jazz spilled from every corner, and design became a beacon of possibility. Out of this cultural momentum came Art Deco, sleek, confident, unapologetically modern. Its language was one of geometry and glamour. Chevrons, zigzags, sunbursts, these weren't just decorative flourishes, they were emblems of speed, motion, optimism. Interiors gleamed with black lacquer, chrome accents, mirrored walls, and the sensuous curves of sculptural furniture. It was a time when homes aspired to be cinematic, theatrical, and impeccably composed. But now, we ask, what happens when that spirit of bold elegance meets the softness of spring? The answer lies in translation, not in dilution. Spring doesn't erase Deco's drama, it edits it with a lighter hand. We exchange the high-contrast palette of onyx and emerald for tones kissed by daylight, champagne and blush, warm ivory and whisper-soft jade. It's like seeing a familiar silhouette through sheer fabric, recognizable, but gentler, more breathable. Velvets are still welcome, but they drape now in layers of gauze, organza, or open-weave linen. Fabrics that catch the air, that glow when the sun hits just right. The metallics remain, too, but instead of hard chrome, we reach for warm brass, aged gold, or the romantic gleam of polished nickel. The shine is still there, but it feels sun-warmed rather than spotlighted. Spring's version of Art Deco is not nostalgia frozen in glass. It's a living reinterpretation, an interior poised between the architectural strength of its origins and the fluidity of the season. Think of it as Deco with its shoes off, basking in a sunbeam. We also begin to see a shift in rhythm. Where traditional Deco marches with precision, spring invites a bit of sway. Floral notes enter, not as literal blooms, but as forms, scalloped edges, fan-like curves, stylized botanicals etched into wallpaper or lacquer. Nature filtered through the grid of modernism. In a spring Deco space, the goal is not to recreate a Parisian salon from 1926 or a Miami lobby in all its opulence. Instead, it's to reinterpret, to allow that same vocabulary of symmetry and structure to speak with a different accent. One that's seasonal, ephemeral, and more attuned to daylight and breath. So as we move forward, let that contrast guide you. Let your materials shimmer softly, let your forms remain strong but yielding, and let your palette bloom, not loudly, but confidently. Because springtime Art Deco isn't about breaking the mold. It's about allowing it to thaw. In Art Deco, structure is poetry. The layout of a living room isn't merely functional, it's a statement. A dance of balance and intention. And at its heart lies symmetry, not the cold symmetry of grids and blueprints, but a cultivated order that radiates elegance. Begin at the center. Visualize the space as a kind of stage. The coffee table becomes your anchor, a sculptural centerpiece, low and commanding. Around it, pairs emerge, twin armchairs with fluted backs, a set of curved lamps, a pair of pedestal-side tables. Everything is in dialogue. Left to right. Front to back. Deco is always aware of its reflection. Now, let's allow spring to step in, not to break the symmetry, but to soften it. Imagine curves easing the sharpness. A semicircular sofa arcs around a round rug, like a crescent moon holding a small sun. Nesting tables with oval contours nestle beside a chair with scalloped upholstery. There's still structure, but now it flows. It moves like a melody rather than a metronome. The living area becomes not just a space to sit, but to move through. To glide through. Deco's radial patterns, the sunburst, the spiral, the fan, become guides for arrangement. Think of a star radiating from a fireplace. Or a chandelier that sets the tone above, with every surrounding element gently echoing its rhythm. This isn't rigid formalism. It's choreography. The room should feel like it's breathing with grace. And openness matters. spring, we crave lightness, not just in materials or colors, but in circulation. Let your layout create pockets of stillness, yes, but also channels of motion. Walkways should feel deliberate but unforced, as though the room itself is guiding you with open arms. Where one space ends, another begins, not with hard lines, but with suggestion. Use matching architectural details, moldings, mirrored panels, sculptural sconces, to visually connect spaces without boxing them in. It should feel like one gesture flowing into the next. This is the art of harmony, of geometry softened by season. A room where even the air feels considered. A layout where every piece, every path, every paired element exists not just for balance, but for beauty. Is the first emotion of a space. Before texture, before layout, even before light, color speaks. And in a spring-infused Art Deco interior, that voice is soft, elegant, and precise. It doesn't shout. It sings. Traditional Art Deco is known for its depth, jewel tones like emerald, sapphire, and obsidian. These colors are dramatic, cinematic, and rooted in the nocturnal glamour of the Jazz Age. But when spring arrives, we let a different light in. We peel back the velvet curtain and step into something more luminous. Something that glows rather than gleams. Here, the palette opens up to a range of light-infused neutrals and pastels. Begin with a foundation that feels like air, ivory, almond, eggshell. These aren't blank backgrounds, they are luminous canvases, reflecting every drop of natural light and allowing bolder accents to emerge gently, like petals opening. Then, the color begins to bloom. Introduce pale mauve, the dusty pink of a faded corsage. Let jade return, not as a heavy stone, but as sea glass kissed by sunlight. Use soft coral sparingly, like a whispered warmth across a pillow or painted onto the inner lining of a lampshade. Think of these shades as brushstrokes, never filling the whole canvas, but always guiding the eye. Metallics remain essential in deco design, but in spring, they take a gentler form. Chrome becomes brushed nickel. Gold becomes rose-toned. Brass appears with a time-worn patina. The effect is one of warmth, not opulence. A room that glimmers, not glitters. And black? Yes, black still belongs. But not as the star. Think of it as eyeliner, framing, grounding, defining. A thin black border on a console table. A piano black lacquered tray. A single dark sculpture in an otherwise pastel vignette. Black in spring deco is the pause between notes, a moment of contrast that makes the surrounding light all the more radiant. Now, layer your color through materiality. Use velvet in blush tones, silk in pale celadon, porcelain in milky white. Choose art prints with hand-drawn lines and painterly hues. Incorporate ceramics, glassware, and fabrics that carry these colors as if they were memories rather than statements. Most importantly, remember, spring deco color is never about saturation. It's about resonance. The palette should feel architectural, yes, but also alive. Breathing. changing as the sun moves across the room. Let color become your atmosphere. Let it speak of light, of glamour, and of growth. In an Art Deco living room, especially one dressed for spring, furniture must do more than serve. It must perform. Each piece is a player in a theatrical ensemble. And not just any ensemble, but one where elegance, presence, and sculptural intent take center stage. Begin by thinking of furniture as architecture in miniature. A sofa is not just a seat, it is a gesture. Choose one with curved lines, perhaps a sweeping silhouette that nods to the arc of a shell or the softness of a spring horizon. The upholstery might be velvet, linen, or a silk blend twill. Not just for comfort, but for light play, fabrics that shift in tone as you move around them, catching the sun or a nearby lamp. Chairs should echo this sculptural language. Imagine a scalloped edge armchair, its back rising like the petals of an artichoke or a sunrise in bas relief. Or a slipper chair with a tight, geometric profile, something that references the stepped forms of Deco architecture, softened by a pastel textile. Coffee tables and side tables are not mere accessories, they are the punctuation marks of the room. Look for distinctive forms, hexagonal tops, demi-lume consoles, waterfall edges. Materials matter here. Lacquered wood in ivory or dove grey. Marble with soft veining, like watercolors trapped in stone. Mirrored panels that reflect the entire room, adding dimension and rhythm. And don't forget fluting, a signature deco detail that feels almost botanical in its repetition. Fluted edges on tables, ribbed bases on lamps, scalloped drawer fronts. These tactile details create shadows and texture even within the palest palette. Spring invites us to add lightness to this structure, not only visually, but emotionally. Choose open-framed pieces in brass or rattan to contrast with more solid silhouettes. Let some furniture lift off the ground on slender legs, allowing light to move underneath and space to breathe. The mix of materials should be intentional, a lacquered cabinet with a marble top and brass pulls, a linen sofa with a polished nickel base, a glass-top table paired with a buccal ottoman. Each piece should offer something unique. A glow, a reflection, a contrast, a curve. And here, furniture becomes a kind of living sculpture. It should feel like it belongs in a gallery, but one that invites you in, asks you to sit, encourages conversation, and suggests the clink of crystal or the scent of fresh-cut flowers. This is furniture with poise, with narrative, with character. Because in spring deco, we're not just decorating a room, we're composing a visual melody. And furniture is the refrain that keeps returning, graceful and memorable. Lighting in an Art Deco living room isn't just a source of brightness, it's a sculpture of atmosphere. A stage light that both reveals and enhances. And in spring, light becomes a kind of poetry. It flutters through windows, glances off mirrored surfaces, and deepens the mood of a space not by intensity, but by intention. Begin at the top. The chandelier is the crown jewel of any Deco-inspired room. But for spring, its grandeur must also feel weightless. Choose a piece that floats, a composition of frosted glass globes suspended like moons in orbit, or slender glass rods cascading like a waterfall frozen mid-motion. The fixture should cast a diffuse, flattering glow. Not cold, not too golden, just soft, like the moment before sunset. And then, bring the light down. Wall sconces are essential. They frame the architecture, flank the fireplace, or line the hallway like elegant sentinels. Seek out forms that nod to Deco's ornamental roots, sunbursts, feathers, fans, rendered in brushed metals or alabaster. Their light should feel ambient, atmospheric, like the halo around a memory. Table lamps, too, must contribute to this layered story. Look for bold bases, stacked spheres, angular zigzags, or stepped columns, and pair them with fabric shades in soft ivory or parchment. These are not background pieces. They are visual anchors, each one a statement of elegance. And don't overlook floor lamps. In spring, tall, slender forms that arch or spiral feel particularly appropriate. They extend the verticality of the Deco aesthetic while gently dispersing light in reading corners or beside seating clusters. But the most important element in spring's lighting design? Natural light. Spring lengthens the day, and the living room should welcome that rhythm. Windows should be dressed in sheer, layered fabrics, something that filters without concealing. Gauzy drapery that moves slightly with the breeze. The goal is not just to see the outside, but to feel its presence inside. Enhance that presence with reflection. Use mirrors, not for vanity, but for radiance. Hang a sunburst mirror above the fireplace, place mirrored trays on console tables, or lean a tall Deco-framed mirror against a wall to double the light from a nearby window. Let crystal and polished surfaces do what they do best, catch the light, split it, and send it dancing across the room like ripples across a pond. In this context, lighting becomes choreography. It's not a single point. It's a constellation. A composition of gleams and shadows. Each source of illumination, whether electric or natural, should play a role in shaping mood, accentuating material, and drawing out detail. Because in spring, we crave glamour that glows, not blinds. Illumination becomes an invitation. A soft radiance that warms the marble, deepens the velvet, and shimmers gently on polished brass. A room lit not only by fixtures, but by the season itself. If lighting is the mood of a room, pattern is its rhythm. And in a spring Art Deco interior, rhythm is everything: steady, elegant, lyrical. Patterns move through the space like a quiet melody, offering structure without weight, ornamentation without noise. This is where Art Deco truly begins to dance. Classic Deco motifs are instantly recognizable. The fan, the sunburst, the chevron. Their geometry is precise, almost architectural, borrowed from the radiance of sunrays, the symmetry of feathers, the dynamism of motion itself. But when spring enters the picture, these motifs soften. They exhale. Consider starting with textiles. A zigzag rug in blush and cream tones feels like a modern echo of Deco's vibrant past. Its rhythm is there, but subdued, as if wrapped in morning light. Or imagine a wallpaper in a pale tone-on-tone fan motif, the design so subtle it only appears when sunlight grazes the surface. These quiet patterns hold space with grace, never overwhelming, always inviting. Glass, too, can carry pattern. Think of etched chevrons on cabinet doors, or a pair of frosted glass sconces with step detailing. These aren't flourishes for flourish's sake, they're part of the architecture. They provide cohesion. A visual tether to the deco tradition, now reframed for a lighter, brighter season. Now bring your attention to soft furnishings, pillows, throws, even lampshades. This is where detail sings. Embroidered edges with stylized florals. Scalloped stitching that echoes shell forms. Decorative fringe in muted gold or dusky pink. These are delicate gestures, like jewelry on a tailored outfit. Spring also invites a new layer of pattern, nature. But not the literal, leafy kind of botanical. Instead, choose stylized references, like an Art Deco rose printing graphite and blush, or a ceramic planter with fluted edges that mimic tulip petals. It's geometry through the lens of growth. Nature as order, as ornament. Stained glass can also make an appearance. Consider a small paneled screen or a window detail with pastel infill, lavender, sage, pale amber, casting colored light onto a floor or wall. In this way, pattern becomes light, and light becomes pattern. The key to spring deco detailing is restraint. It's about suggesting movement, not declaring it. A pattern should feel like something glimpsed through frosted glass, there, but softened. Present, but never overpowering. And through all of this, the repetition of motifs isn't just for style. It's for serenity. The regularity of a chevron, the echo of a curve, the familiarity of a scallop, these are shapes that organize space and emotion. They make a room feel composed, confident, and gently celebratory. Because in the glamour of light, every detail matters. And in spring, even pattern must breathe. Materials in Art Deco design have always carried a kind of luxurious weight. Lacquer, marble, chrome, glass, mirror. They speak the language of opulence, of architectural drama, of a world that believes in the sheen of polish and the geometry of perfection. But spring speaks a different dialect. It doesn't reject richness, it refines it. Softens the edges. Allows the surfaces to breathe and the textures to mingle like light and shadow across a terrace. This is where contrast becomes your greatest tool. A spring Art Deco living room should feel like a dialogue between hard and soft, between the cold brilliance of polished stone and the warm hush of natural fiber. Let's begin with the anchor materials, marble and mirror. They stay, but they evolve. Marble for spring isn't heavy veined black or green, it's creamy travertine, soft grey, or white with subtle pink undertones. Let it top a coffee table or flow across a fireplace hearth. Let it gleam, but don't let it chill the room. Pair it with something textured, a buccal pouf, a linen-covered bench, a velvet ottoman. The goal is to create a dance between reflection and absorption. Mirror remains a pillar of deco, but in spring, use it with restraint. Not full walls, but accents, a mirrored tray on a sideboard, a facete mirror behind a vase of tulips. Or choose antique mirror panels, slightly softened in tone, like memories pressed between layers of glass. Then, turn to wood. While deco traditionally embraced exotic veneers and glossy lacquers, spring invites you to consider lighter, more open-grained options. bleached oak, pale walnut, or even rift-cut ash with just a hint of satin sheen. Let the cabinetry gleam, but let the grain show through, a nod to craftsmanship over spectacle. Textiles are where spring truly makes its presence known. Layer lightness. Use linens for drapery, cottons for slipcovers, and silks or satins for a whisper of sheen. But never all at once. A velvet sofa can be flanked by rattan chairs. A satin pillow can sit beside a chunky knit throw. This play of density and delicacy enlivens the space. And don't forget about woven elements. Rattan, caning, and wicker, materials more associated with tropical breezes than deco salons, can find a new home here. A rattan-framed mirror, a caned cabinet front, or a delicate wicker basket holding fresh florals. These touches add breath to the room, like open windows in the first days of spring. Metal, too, takes on a softer tone. Instead of high-shine chrome, choose brushed brass, antique silver, or rose gold. Use it as a thread throughout, on lamp bases, drawer pulls, curtain rods. Let it catch the light, but let it whisper, not shout. Texture, in the end, is what makes the room feel real. Layering is essential. A fluted ceramic lamp sits atop a lacquered table. A velvet cushion rests against a linen-covered chaise. A silk runner glides across a wood credenza. Each combination is a small composition, materials in conversation, not competition. The result is a room that feels both curated and comforting. That honors the strength of deco but welcomes the softness of spring. A room where the hard surfaces gleam with elegance, and the soft ones ground you in calm. Because in spring, texture is not only visual, it's emotional. It's the difference between cold glamour and lived-in beauty. Between polish and poetry. In the Art Deco living room, objects are never just decoration. Their punctuation marks elegant pauses that complete the sentence of the space. And in spring, these objects take on a new kind of glamour. One that doesn't overwhelm, but enchants. One that doesn't feel frozen in the past, but quietly alive in the present. Let's begin with the art. Spring in a deco context calls for imagery that balances strength with softness. Look to stylized prints of women from the 1920s, portraits with arched brows, long necks, and flowing hair rendered in pastel palettes. Dancers mid-motion, their forms captured in sweeping lines. Or botanical illustrations, not realistic, but romantic. Tulips outlined in rose gold, ferns traced in graphite on pale parchment. These pieces anchor the room in a sense of timeless beauty, but they also let the season speak. Frames matter just as much as the art. Choose stepped or geometric frames in brass, lacquer, or even bone. Consider asymmetrical arrangements on walls, or better yet, one bold piece centered on a gallery wall of mirrors, letting art and reflection merge. Then there are the objects, the curated curiosities that lend the room soul. Think of sculptural vases in soft jade or blush, perhaps fluted or facete, echoing the geometry of deco architecture. Or small ceramic busts, graceful, Grecian, but with a stylized deco twist. Use perfume bottles, not just tucked away but on display, cut glass with metallic accents, glinting like captured sunlight. These are objects that belong on step trays or inlaid consoles. Place them deliberately. Let there be space around them, breathing room. In deco, display is ceremony. A shallow bowl on a low table might hold nothing but light. A single pale feather in a fluted vessel. A cluster of shells on a slab of onyx. Simplicity becomes sophistication. Books are part of this language, too. Stack them with intention. Choose titles with beautiful spines, gilded, embossed, or fabric-bound. Let them hold their own on a coffee table or lean beside a vase on a floating shelf. A book, after all, is not just an object, it's a narrative waiting to be read, like the room itself. And finally, Remember reflection. Use mirrored boxes, crystal paperweights, or even lucite picture frames to catch and carry light. The goal is never clutter, it's cadence. A rhythm of shine, shadow, texture, and grace. This is not about maximalism. This is about meaning. About creating a constellation of beauty across the room, the objects with presence, not just placement. In spring, the glamour of objects is not about excess, it's about clarity. Each piece should feel chosen, cared for, and part of a larger mood. The mood of a room where light lingers on a polished edge. Where history and the season meet in quiet splendor. If spring is a language, then flowers are its most eloquent words. In an Art Deco living room, where geometry and glamour rule the stage, florals and botanicals become the gentle counterpoint, the softness that completes the composition. They are not merely decorative. They are alive. And that aliveness is precisely what makes a spring Art Deco space feel vibrant and new. But florals in this context are not wild or unruly. They are sculpted, considered, composed like still-life paintings. Their presence is elegant and architectural, more akin to sculpture than arrangement. Start with form. A single calla lily in a crystal vase says more than a dozen roses. It's a deco motif made organic. Or take a bunch of ranunculus, their layered petals resembling tiny artichokes of silk, placed low and tight in a mirrored cube. The container matters as much as the contents: fluted glass, metallic inlay, or a stepped ceramic base that mirrors the lines of the space around it. Tulips are particularly suited to this style. Their clean arcs and soft droops embody spring's grace. Let them spill gently from a facete vase, their stems splaying asymmetrically, structured, yet free. Or opt for orchids in soft apricot or white, standing like living architecture against a mirrored backdrop. Greenery, too, becomes a design element, not an afterthought. Use it with intention. A palm placed just behind a curved sofa, echoing its silhouette. A pair of rubber plants in deco planters, their symmetry framing the fireplace or anchoring a sunlit corner. Or ferns, feathery and romantic, spilling gently over the edge of a console, softening the room's edges without muddying its lines. Your vessels should echo the aesthetic of the room. Think of fluted ceramic, stepped glass, polished stone, or matte metallics. The vase is part of the composition. It should reflect the light, mirror the geometry, and elevate the plant it holds. And remember the power of restraint. Not every surface needs a floral touch. A single bloom on a side table, a low arrangement on the dining console, a stem in a powder room. These moments are more powerful when they are not everywhere. They draw the eye, slow time, and introduce a breath of the outdoors in a room of interiors. You might even consider dried or preserved botanicals in soft, dusty hues. Pampas grass in pale coral. Dried eucalyptus in silver green. These offer texture without demanding maintenance, and their sculptural quality aligns beautifully with the Art Deco ethos. The key is harmony. Every plant, every flower, every leaf should feel as though it was meant to be there, not as a flourish, but as a foundational part of the room's rhythm. They bring balance. They bring vitality. They bring the outdoors in, filtered through the lens of elegance. In spring, floral styling is not an afterthought, it's a voice in the room's chorus. And when done with care, that voice whispers of newness, renewal, and natural beauty framed in human hands. Art Deco has long been associated with the glamour of a bygone era, a world of crystal chandeliers, mirrored walls, and symphonic symmetry. A time when interiors echoed the optimism of the machine age, and every detail, from a scalloped lampshade to a lacquered console, was part of a larger orchestration of elegance. But when spring enters the frame, something remarkable happens. The style breathes. It loosens its collar, lets the light in, and begins to glow from within. The hard edges soften. The palette warms. The rhythm of geometry now dances with the rhythm of nature. And what emerges is not a contradiction, but a transformation. Spring Deco is not about nostalgia. It's not about recreating a vintage salon down to the last tassel. It's about reinterpretation. About seeing this iconic aesthetic through the lens of renewal. Through light that lingers longer in the day. Through colors that feel kissed by bloom. Through spaces that don't just dazzle, but embrace. In a spring Art Deco living room, the interplay of polished surfaces and soft textures tells a story of elegance evolving. Of glamour that's not stuck in amber but is fluid, like the season itself. The sparkle of a mirrored tray. The curve of a pale pink tulip. The shimmer of satin beside the whisper of linen. These are not accidents. They are the intentional merging of tradition and change. And perhaps, that's the real allure of seasonal design. It allows us to revisit old forms not with reverence alone, but with curiosity, with a willingness to reimagine. To ask, what does this space want to feel like now? What does glamour mean when filtered through sunlight and filtered air? This spring, let your living room become a place of clarity and joy. Let it be your personal stage set, not for performance, but for presence. For quiet mornings by a sun-drenched window. For conversations softened by candlelight. For evenings when the air smells faintly of magnolia and the floor catches the gold of the setting sun. Thank you for spending time with us here at Charette Theory. If you're dreaming up your own version of springtime elegance, your own Glamour of Light, we would love to hear about it. Share your inspirations in the comments and let us know what forms your spaces are taking this season. Until next time, breathe in the light, trust your eye, and let design be your poetry.